40 minutes, 40 years, or 40 seconds. Time is just a measure of how long we wait for the end. September 1st, 1939. The sun rose over Europe, but it brought no warmth, only a chilling shadow from the west. Families gathered in dim living rooms, ears pressed to radios, waiting for the words that would shatter their world. And then, the sound. Not of thunder, but of boots, millions of them, striking the earth like the drums of war. Diplomacy had failed. The ink on the treaties was barely dry before it was replaced by blood. The border was crossed. The German war machine, the Wehrmacht, roared to life. Imagine being 18, standing in a dirt trench, knowing that the greatest army in history is coming for you. They didn't just attack the land, they attacked the mind. The Stuka dive bombers screamed like banshees. Warsaw burned. It wasn't a battle, it was an execution, a display of raw industrial power. In a matter of days, a nation was erased. The world watched in horror and did nothing. 1940. The contagion spread. Denmark, Norway, Belgium, and finally, the unthinkable, Paris. The boots that crushed Poland now echoed on the Champs-Élysées. The city of light went dark. Europe was suffocating. The swastika flew from the Arctic to the Atlantic. Freedom was a memory. But the British Army was still alive, trapped, cornered at Dunkirk, between the Devil and the deep blue sea. 300,000 men waiting to die. Hitler ordered his tanks to stop. A mistake or a cruel pause? Then, a miracle. Not a navy of destroyers, but a fleet of fishermen. Ordinary people sailing into the jaws of hell. They came for their sons. They came for their brothers. A mosquito armada defying the Luftwaffe. They left their guns on the beach, but they saved the army. Britain survived to fight another day. But survival is not victory. Across the channel, a man with an iron will prepared his people for the storm. The Battle of France was over. The Battle of Britain was about to begin. They turned off the lights in London. But the fires lit up the night like day. The underground became a bedroom, rich and poor, huddled together on the concrete tracks. 57 consecutive nights of bombing. Imagine that. 57 nights of wondering if this breath is your last. Our only defense was a few hundred boys, fresh out of school, strapped into Spitfires. They flew until they passed out. They fought until they ran out of bullets. The few against the many. And slowly, the German invincible Air Force began to bleed. They realized this island would not break. Hitler changed tactics. He sent the robots, the V-1 flying bomb, the buzz bomb. You could hear it coming, a rattling engine. But the terror wasn't the sound. It was the silence. When the engine cut, you had 10 seconds to pray. London was scarred, but London was standing. Hitler turned his back on the West and looked east. June 1941, Operation Barbarossa. The largest invasion force in human history. 3 million men, 3,000 tanks, marched into the endless Russian steppe. They didn't come to conquer, they came to exterminate. It was a war of annihilation. The Red Army collapsed. Entire armies were surrounded and captured. The road to Moscow was open. The Germans thought it would be over by Christmas. They brought summer uniforms. They brought champagne. But they forgot one thing. Russia is not just a country. It is a force of nature. October came. The mud slowed the tanks. November came, and the ground turned to iron. General Winter had arrived. Temperatures dropped to -40. Oil froze. Guns jammed. They could see the spires of Moscow through their binoculars, but they couldn't take another step. And then, from the white mist, the Siberian divisions arrived. The bear had awakened. While Europe froze in the grip of winter, half a world away, the waters of the Pacific were warm and dangerous. The Empire of Japan was on the move, hungry for oil, hungry for power. They looked east towards a sleeping giant. They didn't plan a battle. They planned an assassination. A strike so sudden, it would break America's spine before the fight began. Short radio silence. The Kido Butai fleet moved across thousands of miles of ocean, invisible like a phantom. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, Sunday morning. Sailors slept in. Others played ball. The war felt 1,000,000 miles away. 7:02 a.m. A radar station picked up a massive signal. Just a flight of B-17s, they were told. Don't worry. But they weren't B-17s. As the clouds parted, the rising sun emblem shone on the wings of death. The sky turned black with planes. Tora, Tora, Tora! Surprise was total. The torpedoes were specially modified for shallow water. They ran true, straight for the heart of the Pacific Fleet. December 7th, 1941. In a split second, the USS Arizona became a tomb for 1,000 men. Battleship Row was burning. The pride of the Navy was sinking into the mud. Japan cheered, but they had made a fatal error. Admiral Yamamoto reportedly said, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." The next day, a crippled president stood up. A date which will live in infamy. America was at war. The giant didn't just wake up, it roared. Detroit stopped making cars and started making tanks. Kitchens made bullets. They lined up by the millions, not just to fight, but to avenge. The isolationist America was dead. April 1942, the Doolittle Raid. A suicide mission just to prove a point. We can touch you. Tokyo was bombed. The damage was small, but the message was loud. The war was coming to Japan's doorstep. But the early months were brutal. The Philippines fell. Bataan fell. The Japanese army seemed invincible. Thousands of prisoners were marched to their deaths. The cruelty of the Pacific War was revealed. The Japanese empire expanded like a cancer. Nothing could stop them until Midway. The battle wasn't started with guns, but with mathematics. American intelligence cracked the Japanese naval code. We knew where they were going. Midway, a tiny atoll in the middle of nowhere. We set a trap. Outnumbered and outgunned, the U.S. Navy waited, hidden beyond the horizon. Fate hung by a thread. A Japanese scout plane missed the American carriers by mere miles. U.S. bombers searched the empty ocean. Fuel was running low. They were about to turn back. Then, a stroke of luck. A lone Japanese destroyer rushing back to its fleet. It led the Americans straight to the target. The Japanese decks were full of fuel and bombs. They were floating powder kegs waiting for a spark. The dauntless bombers tipped over. 6 minutes. That's all it took to change the course of history. Kaga, Akagi, Soryu. 3 carriers turned into infernos in an instant. The Hiryu would follow soon after. The backbone of the Imperial Navy was broken. The sun had stopped rising, but the sea was only half the battle. Now came the islands: Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan. It wasn't just fighting the enemy, it was fighting the jungle, malaria, heat, rain that never stopped. The Japanese fought with a code, Bushido, no surrender, death before dishonor. They launched banzai charges, human waves running into machine gun fire. It was psychological warfare. We had to burn them out, cave by cave, bunker by bunker. The brutality escalated every day. As desperation grew, they turned their planes into missiles, the divine wind, kamikaze. How do you fight an enemy who wants to die? The Pacific War became a descent into madness. Each island brought us closer to Japan, but the cost was rising. The ocean turned red with blood. Underwater, US submarines strangled Japan's supply lines, starving the island nations slowly. But promises were kept. MacArthur returned. The Americans were not stopping until they reached Tokyo.